It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Move over WWE. The WWGOP is front and center. The team of trained monkeys hopping around on display. I got to tell you, I was expecting Mean Gene Okerlund to come out of the box. I was waiting for it. I'm serious. I mean, what we saw today from the Republicans, WWE, you got nothing on them. This was for wrestling fans. You gotta look at the showmanship and go, good job. You've spent years honing your craft. Now, this isn't about governing. This isn't about making lives better. This isn't about doing any of the things we talk about that need to get done. This isn't about getting stuff done. This is about, scoring points. This is about, snap into a Slim Jim. It's about the next gig. It's about the next thing they can sell. It's about, hey, look at me. Maybe I can get on Fox News. It's insane what has happened to our political arena. Yes, it's the arena. It's crazy. But predictable. This is the world that we're in. And look, I know people in Congress, when you talk to them aside, you realize that the showmanship, the game, what we see on the cable news channels and the kind of display that we see is all staged. It's all political theater. It's all bread and circus. It's all to keep us at each other so that we don't demand that they actually get something done. They score their points with a minority of their base. It's going to keep them all tingly in the panties and all wadded up. And nothing gets done. From the January 6th Select Committee to an infrastructure bill to, paying our freaking bills, the GOP is using every stunt, every gimmick, every scam, everything that they can dream up to get nothing done. There was a moment, and this is one of those things where I want to start today with, there was a moment of truth. And it's one of those things where you just go, there's a couple of moments in time where truth is possible. And I look at the House Minority Leader, Kevin McCarthy, who today, really, good on him, put on a good display. Mean Gene would have been proud. Hulk Hogan would have, come back with the fist are rising, and all of that. But on January 6th, there was a moment of truth. And the reason we know this is because Washington Republican Representative Jamie Herrera Butler came out and said, look, this is what happened when we finally got through to Donald Trump. When Kevin McCarthy finally got through and was told by Trump that the people out in the streets are more upset about him losing the election than Kevin McCarthy is. And, in this expletive-laden back and forth about telling Trump to stop what was going on, that was a moment of truth. That was Kevin McCarthy, one, worried that maybe he was going to get lynched. And I think that kind of fear brings out visceral reactions that are honest. And this is why I said from the beginning, this committee, this commission, whatever, should have started within a week of January 6th, or at least on January 21st. Because the farther we get away from the horrible activities of that day, the treason, the sedition of that day, the more you're going to get the spin meisters at Fox News and further insane to spin it to go, no. It wasn't an insurrection. It was just another tourist day. It was a good day. No, yeah, a little glass got broken, but that's okay. They were just a little rambunctious, a little over anxious. You got the president himself saying the reason that they were doing it was to stop the certification of the election. You've got people coming out and saying, yeah, that's the reason we went. Wasn't that the whole reason? It's a revolution. We were storming the Capitol to stop the business of the House of Representatives, to stop the certification of the election. That's why they did it. And it's interesting that Trump even admitted it. And you can't get the Kevin McCarthy's of the world to go on with it. Now, the story today, clearly, Kevin McCarthy came out with his handful of representatives that he wants on the select committee. And Nancy Pelosi said, sorry, we're not going to put Jim Jordan and Jim Banks on the committee. Personally, I think it was a dumb idea. I think you should have left Jim Jordan and Jim Banks there. Let them do their dog and pony show. That just me. I would have left them there. And I would have ridiculed them at every opportunity, and I would have highlighted their insanity and their loyalty and highlighted what they were doing. Now, I do understand why she said, no, these are unprecedented times. We're not doing this. We're not turning this into a dog and pony show. I do understand it. Personally, don't agree with it. This is going to give them the opportunity to do more of this WWGOP grandstanding that they're really good at. And why are they good at it? They got a lot of places to do it. Understand, conservative right-wing media is dominant in this country. It is the dominant media in this country. Now everyone, oh, no, Rick, no, the liberal ABCs and NBCs, the liberal alphabet media. I love how they turn that. I love how they turn that for themselves. It's not true, but they repeat it often enough that they've even convinced themselves. But like I said, I think it was a mistake. But here's the thing, and this is the part that really is kind of infuriating, because Republicans had an opportunity to not have this partisan committee. They had an opportunity to have a nonpartisan select committee of people to investigate this, with deadlines, with all kinds of things that I wasn't thrilled with. They had a chance to vote for it, and they chose not to. So understand, from the beginning of this, they don't want to get to the bottom of it. They don't want the fingers pointed at who's responsible. Donald Trump and all of the Republican legislators, people like Jim Jordan, who stoked the fires and riled these people up. The representatives who gave tours the day before and the days before. We need to see this. The moneyed interests who funded this stuff. The political action committees who stoked the flames. We need to investigate this stuff. And the Republicans clearly don't want that to happen. They clearly do not. And look, someone like Banks and Jordan, they are people who are diehard Trump people. They are going to they're going to be basically Trump's defense team. And I get why Pelosi doesn't want them there, but I think it's a mistake to not have them there, because they are going to do the WWGOP stuff. They are going to grandstand. They are going to try and move the narrative to a more favorable narrative for Trump. Understand, there was one guy there that day saying, we're going to the Capitol. There was one guy there that day who was saying, we're going to stop this. One guy. It's crazy. But again, this isn't unpredictable. The stuff that we see, the divisions that we see, are not unpredictable. This is who the WWGOP is. This is wrestling stuff. This is all designed for the camera. And look, I have friends who are huge wrestling fans. Some of them, this is the fun part. Some of them think it's real. And this is the thing that, and I just had this conversation today. Some of the folks there are actually internalizing that every attack that the Republicans throw out and want us to believe is imminent. They internalize. I know people, you can't get a positive word out of them. Everybody's attacking them. The world is against them, and they're fighting everybody because that's the Republican mindset. That's the elixir that they've thrown out to get people hooked on this kind of grievance radio and TV, this kind of anger politics. To where it's not about getting things done. It's not about making roads and bridges better. It's not about educating children. It's not about healthcare. It's not about any of that stuff. It's about scoring points and punishing the other side. We're going to tick off those libtards. And anything that moves us forward as a country. Now understand, we're under attack. We are in the midst of a foreign-led civil war. The sad reality is most of us don't understand it. Because our fault lines are being really highlighted by foreign actors. And they're using social media to do it. And we buy into it. And our politicians buy into it. Again, they could have set up a nonpartisan committee. They could have voted for it, and they didn't. And then you see these stories, oh, immediately they regret it. It's buyer's remorse. They knew exactly what they were doing. And again, we're going to see this political theater play out again. Mitch McConnell came out and said that the Senate, this is great. This is one of those things that just goes, oh my gosh, you got to be kidding me. But Mitch McConnell has now come out and said that they're not going to do any debt ceiling raising anytime soon. Not going to happen. There will be no Republicans who will vote to raise the debt ceiling. Yet the last guy spent trillions of dollars. Raised the debt ceiling for that. We already spent the money. Again, the time to fight these things is before you spend the money. Now we've got a debt ceiling that we're going to bump up against, and now it's going to be the same kind of grandstanding and the same kind of, oh, how much we care about debt and deficits. And it's going to be comical because they're going to pretend like they've never run up a deficit, that they've never given away trillions of dollars to the very wealthy and big corporations, that they're not, taxing spenders or borrowing spenders, that they are. No. They're clean as the driven snow. And the same thing, we're watching it happen right now. With vaccines. We're now seeing people like Sean Hannity telling people to get vaccinated. We're seeing people like Mitch McConnell going, well, I don't know. We should be getting vaccinated. We got 3 safe vaccines. I don't know why people ain't doing it. You go, dum-dum, your party's been saying it's been a hoax. Your party's the one who's saying, no, don't do it. And now they're dying. And now we're looking down the barrel of another spike where potentially thousands more people are going to die every day. And now someone's coming around going, well, hold on, we better change our tune on this because the people who are dying, those are our people. Now remember, when Jared Kushner said, it's just New York, just Washington, those aren't our people. Don't worry about it. Because it was Democrats getting sick. Now that it's the Fox News viewers, now that it's these rural states and these rural districts that are going, we ain't got no healthcare system here to take care of us. We're kind of screwed. Now you're seeing the conservatives going, no, you should probably get vaccinated. We should probably do this. And it's too far gone. They are too far gone. And it's going to take their base dying. And maybe that's the lesson learned. I mean, maybe that's it. Today, there was a cloture vote on the infrastructure bill. Republicans blocked the cloture vote. Doing again this WWGOP stuff. They agreed to a bipartisan bill, and now you got people. No, we need to slow down. We need to get it right. Rob Portman, and I got to be honest. One of Portman's comments I actually liked. He said, we're just not ready. I mean, the bill's still being negotiated. So, yeah, it's not going to be uncork the wine and or the Little Kings. I'm going, hey, I remember Little Kings. That was good beer. Good for you. At least having one decent thing to say. But he says, no, we need more time. And more time means we're going to drag this out as long as we can so that next election comes around, we can take credit for it. That's what that means, because that's the political theater. That's the gamesmanship in all of this. You can't give Joe Biden a win on infrastructure because people will be happy that they have jobs. They'll be happy that their community's getting the infrastructure that they need. They'll be happy that their internet doesn't suck. They'll be happy that their kids are going to get an education. They're going to be happy. They're going to be happy. And when people are happy, they're not mad. And when they're not mad, you can't rile them up. And these kind of bizarre tactics that we've been seeing the Republicans get away with don't work. When you can't make people jealous or angry, their tactics don't work. So what they have to do is they have to make sure they keep throwing the wrench into the gears. They need to keep gumming things up. They need to keep slowing things down so things don't get done. So that people give me the, well, Rick, them there Democrats and Republicans, they're all alike. And in some ways they are. You're not going to get an argument out of me on corporate interests and all of that. But when it comes down to actually helping people and getting things done, there's a huge difference, a monumental difference. For me, the number one difference is I haven't found a pro-labor Republican politician outside of a major city. There's one here in Pennsylvania, Fitzpatrick in Philly. You can't find another one. And the Republican Party has been vehemently anti-union. Yet I talk to union members every day. I'm a diehard Republican. Why? Because of what I see on TV. I'm angry like they are. I've bought the lies. I've bought the showmanship. Because I like wrestling. Because that's basically what our political system has turned into. A Saturday Night Raw. Sad stuff. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1877. That was the day some of the worst violence of the Great Railroad Strike erupted in Pittsburgh. The strike started days earlier. It's contested as to whether it began in Martinsburg, West Virginia, or Baltimore, Maryland. The strike spread rapidly along the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad to New York State, Pennsylvania, and throughout the Midwest. At its height, the Great Railroad Strike involved well over 100,000 workers. The strike began on the Pennsylvania Railroad on the 19th. Management repeatedly tried to move trains through the yards and was confronted by angry strikers. Pennsylvania guardsmen were called out. The strikers presented the railroad with their demands. They wanted an end to double-engine trains that required fewer workers, wages reinstated, reinstatement for their fired co-workers, and an end to pay grades. Local militia sided with the strikers and refused to show for duty. When thousands of strikers gathered at the depot, the Pennsylvania National Guard moved unsuccessfully to disperse them. Then they fired on the strikers, killing 20 and wounding 29. The strikers were infuriated by the deadly aggression and drove guardsmen into a nearby railroad roundhouse. Word spread quickly throughout the city of the massacre, launching a virtual general strike. Workers began seizing arms wherever they could find them. They set fires to dozens of railroad buildings, burned down the Union Depot, destroyed over 100 locomotives, and more than 1,000 freight and passenger cars. The next day, guardsmen shot their way out of the roundhouse, killing 20 more as they were chased from the city. A total of 3,000 federal troops would be necessary to quell strikers' fury by month's end. Labor History in 2, brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So like I said, I'm still frustrated by the performance that we're seeing, the bread and circus that we're seeing coming out of D.C. But not as angry as I am at the news media from yesterday, and even bleeding into today about Jeff Bezos and defending, our billionaire who just decided, hey, I'm going to go up for a little ride in the sky, like an amusement park ride. There was no rhyme or reason to why they went. There was no scientific purpose. It was just because, hey, I can. And in that one little moment of clarity, and look, I give Bezos credit. He was honest. Guy's honest. He came right out and told the truth.
And then I want to thank every Amazon employee and every Amazon customer, because you guys paid for all of this. So seriously, for every Amazon customer out there and every Amazon employee, thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Oh, thank you for paying for all of this and the rest of my lifestyle, the $500 million little boat I'm going to be floating around in, and all of the other things. Thank you for not taking breaks or going to the bathroom or doing any of those things or asking for a union. Thank you for that. So I can go play in space. Just nuts to me and angering. But again, we paid for it, which is why we need to have policies to hold people like this accountable. But here again, we can't seem to get an infrastructure plan through. Thanks, GOP today. There was no cloture vote going to happen. I think everyone knew that. And here to share some thoughts on, are we going to get an infrastructure bill on either side? Is the right going to be able to torpedo it, or will AOC and the squad take it down as well? Here to share some thoughts on that, I've asked our good friend Max Burns to come talk with us. Max is a Democratic strategist, also a columnist over at the Daily Beast. He's got a new piece out on that very topic of, could it be possible that AOC and the squad take this down? Max, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So surprised that no cloture vote today?
Not really. I think Republicans sort of signaled earlier in the week that they weren't ready. Mitt Romney asked Chuck Schumer to delay until next week this vote that happened today. I think most people thought this would fail. It doesn't necessarily set things back much, as Schumer can come back and take this vote again next week. But who knows what's going to happen there. And we're once again just letting Republicans decide the pace of action. And it's baffling for a party that's in control of the Senate.
Yeah, but it comes back to it. We've got problems. You got Joe Manchin, you got Kelly, you've got Simina, you've got problems.
There are, and so much attention has been paid to Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin that the progressive side of this equation has been completely forgotten. And in the House, they're starting to take notice of that. You see, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Cori Bush, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley have all said that if this infrastructure bill doesn't include significant social infrastructure spending, and that's caretakers for the elderly, after school attendance for kids who need after school care, these things that keep our economy running through people power, if that isn't included in the budget, they're not going to vote for it. And they have the votes to essentially kill infrastructure, even if it passes the Senate.
Yeah. So now you pointed out in your piece that J.P. Morgan, their market note, predicted that we were going to get one or the other. You're going to get the bipartisan plan or the reconciliation plan. There was no way that both of them were going to pass. Is that where your mindset is?
I am a bit more optimistic, and I think Joe Biden certainly needs to be, because he needs both of these to pass for this trick to essentially work. He needs the bipartisan bill to get most of the hard infrastructure that he wants and that Joe Manchin wants. But he also needs this party line reconciliation bill to pass with as much climate spending, as much social infrastructure spending as possible, to make sure that AOC and the squad and the left have something that they can claim victory on too. If just that bipartisan bill comes to the House with nothing for the left, I would expect to see a huge fight on the floor of the House. That would be a huge distraction for Joe Biden.
Yeah, I agree. So this is why, Biden said that they were going to move them both at the same time. But this is where it's kind of like that chicken and egg thing, where, if you bring that bipartisan bill and you do move, that priority, you're probably not getting the other side of it. So, look, I'm not surprised that, Omar and Ocasio-Cortez and the rest of them are saying, no, wait, we want to make sure that we get actual people some help too. I'm not surprised by that.
No, and they're absolutely right. I mean, climate change infrastructure is in many ways the only infrastructure that matters. Because if we don't build that out now, in 20 years, the infrastructure we build from this package will have to be replaced from the effects of climate change.
Right.
I mean, this is a situation where Joe Biden has gotten so focused on winning GOP support that he's forgotten that there is a wing of this party that was critical to electing him that has not felt a lot of love from the Democratic Party lately, and they're making their frustration known.
No, and look, I understand that, but I come from the school of, I want the possible over the perfect. I'm willing to give up some things. I'm willing to make some compromise to get something done, because I realize, and I've seen this through years of following political stuff, that we get into these moments where we end up 6 months down the road with nothing. And if that happens, the Democrats are toast in 22.
No, absolutely. I mean, infrastructure has to pass. And this will be a real test of principle for the left. I think if AOC can hold together this coalition, then she puts herself in an incredible negotiating position. But if it starts to fracture, I think that spells a real tough time for the left, which is already facing some internal challenges. But I mean, Democrats have got to deliver on this. There is no alternative. There's no going back and saying Republicans outplayed us. The voters are expecting this. They were promised this, and they will revolt if they don't get it.
No, I mean, there's a bunch in this that I want to see. First and foremost, I want to see the PRO Act as part of the reconciliation bill. Because I know Republicans are not going to restore labor rights in this country where we need to get them, so that people, as we're building this critical infrastructure and we're doing these things, that workers have the ability to actually benefit from them. What's the sense of making a bunch of crummy low-wage jobs and where people aren't getting ahead and families aren't doing better? What's the point of doing that? If I'd say we have to have both of them.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And I mean, this is all funded through tax increases on the wealthy and an increase in IRS enforcement. Except now the GOP, through Rob Portman, said over the weekend, they will not accept any increase in the IRS's funding to go after tax cheats, to go after people who are hiding their assets. Democrats need to find some other way to pay for this bill. And it just shows you that the Republicans are not serious about addressing these core problems.
Yeah.
We could pay for this bill year one with proper funding for the IRS to go after tax cheats. There's a reason Republicans don't want the IRS doing that. And that's that a lot of those tax cheats are on their donor rolls.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that's weird to me, because, I talk to Republican voters, diehard, and they're the ones who are still wearing the T-shirts. And the tax issue is one of those things that they get. When I start turning a conversation to going, okay, you're against, the left and you're against all this stuff. You start talking about taxes. You start talking about, Jeff Bezos going up into space and paying a lower tax rate than working people are. They get that. So I'm kind of in this weird spot of going, how is it that Republicans are not doing the polling on their own base, who this has got to be popular with?
Yeah, I think Republicans are committing the same sort of mistake now that Democrats with Hillary Clinton did in 2016, which is taking for granted where their voters are. The GOP thinks with Trump, they have these voters. They'll do whatever Trump tells them to do. They'll vote for Republicans if Trump tells them to do it. And we know from history that's not true. These voters will vote for Donald Trump, absolutely. The rest of the GOP is on its own. And part of the reason Joe Biden was so successful this last cycle was talking to Republicans who are losing jobs, who are being priced out of their own neighborhoods, and saying, it upsets me too that Jeff Bezos has his own space program and you can't even get money to retrain for a different job. And those are the kind of messages that resonate. And right now, Republicans are in the way. So that only hurts them.
So what is the messaging out of today then? I mean, you seem a little bit more forgiving about it not going forward because Romney and others did ask for another week. So let's say we give them another week down the road, we don't get a cloture vote. What's the message out of that? Because, I'm looking at it going, this infrastructure bill, especially the hard infrastructure bill, those are millions of good, solid union wage jobs that can be created all across this country with a reverberation effect in every local economy across this country. Red state, blue state, purple state, green state, it doesn't matter. This is a big deal. And yet, if we don't get something else, what's the messaging out of that?
Yeah, and if I sound overly understanding of Chuck Schumer, which is not my normal mode, it's because I understand what's at stake here. We need these jobs that this bill will bring. We need this economic investment. And quite frankly, the messaging coming out of this should be one of unity within the party, of saying, we'll give Republicans the extra couple days they asked for. Sure, we'll take the vote again on Monday or Tuesday. But if they back down again, if they change the goalposts again, we stuff all of that bill into reconciliation and pass it with 50 votes and Kamala Harris. We're done with them. We move on. And then we figure out what the House needs to get it through.
Ultimately, is that the plan? Yeah, ultimately, do you think that's the plan? Do you think Simina and Kelly and Warner and Manchin, do you think they, in that environment, in that scenario, do you think they come along with the big plan?
Oh, yeah. I think the only way you show Manchin that there's no way out is to keep taking these votes where Republicans refuse to come along. And eventually you have to say, Joe, we've taken 10 votes on this. The bipartisanship you promised is not happening. Let's put this in reconciliation and get it done as Democrats. If we can't do it together, let's at least do it.
Yeah,
and that should be the messaging going forward.
No, I look at Manchin and I'm going, man, this guy has such leverage that he could get a huge influx of investment, of infrastructure, of job training, of anything he wants out of this bill to make his state better off. I'm just going, and I know those talks are happening, but I'm like, man, you could really leverage this thing to benefit your state.
Yeah, and Joe Manchin knows that. I mean, that's why Joe Manchin supports reconciliation. That's one of the reasons Manchin has kept that party line infrastructure bill moving forward, even as it gets bigger and bigger, because he understands what that represents for his districts, what it represents for his workers and his state's residents, and what it represents for him politically as a guy who can get things done. And that's what he has positioned himself as. This is his chance to deliver on it.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is the social infrastructure part that AOC and the squad is pushing forward on. And I know the right, they get all tingly in the panties and all wadded up when they talk about AOC and the left and socialism and, oh my God, the squirrel. But all the stuff that they're talking about is actually going to make their constituents' lives better. Because there are old people in blue states and red states. There are families that need caregivers in those states. There are families that need their kids to be able to go to community college. There's so many things that it doesn't matter, red, blue, purple, orange. It doesn't matter. Families need stuff. I can't believe Republicans are going, no, we're not doing any of that.
And increasingly, state Republicans can't either. We've seen quite a few Republican mayors in places like Oklahoma, Nebraska, Kansas, going on the Sunday shows and saying, I don't care what Republicans have to say to get it done. I need it to get done for my constituents because we're suffering. And if the GOP can't deliver, my constituents aren't going to vote for Republicans. It's as simple as that. It's up to Republicans to get it together for the country and come together on this, or Democrats will move forward by themselves.
Yeah, well, I think that has to happen. But I used to believe that. I used to believe that Republican voters would hold their elected officials accountable for not doing things to help them. But we've seen cycle after cycle that just not to be true, where the party of no continually brings nothing back to their districts and they still get reelected. Before you go, I wanted to get your thoughts on the story today about Kevin McCarthy and Jim Jordan and Banks not being on the commission, and evidently they're not going to have anybody. I wanted to get your thoughts on the whole scene.
Well, this is so characteristically Kevin McCarthy. This is party and politics and messaging over country every step of the way. I mean, putting in members on this commission who are active witnesses, who will need to provide testimony as to their own role in potentially instigating this riot. He knew from the beginning this was a no-go. His plan was to fill this commission with clowns because, if I have a commission full of clowns, I'm not liable to take anything they say very seriously. And the hope is for the GOP that they can distract and delegitimize this so that people don't take it seriously. Because the biggest fear they have is that the truth comes out about their role in inciting this riot.
Yeah, but you see this all the time. The WWGOP and their antics. This, I fear, plays into that. I personally, if it were me, if I were Speaker Pelosi, I would have let them stay. I would have most certainly done everything I could do to neutralize them there. But by bringing them off and giving them this ability to create this whole other circus, I think that was, I don't know. I think we'll see. I think it was a bad move.
Yeah, I see your point. But at some point, we have to say that we are willing as Democrats, as patriots, to lose a couple media cycles for the greater purpose of democracy. I mean, some things are more important than getting hit hard in Politico because Nancy Pelosi is too partisan. Finding the truth about what happened on January 6th is the one singular purpose of that commission. And Nancy Pelosi should do everything she can to keep that integrity and to keep that purpose. If we start letting in jokers, it's as good as gone.
No, I'm with you, but it's a party of jokers. I mean, from top to bottom, you can't find but a handful of decent ones.
Yeah.
And that's sad because
argument for me.
No, it's sad because I used to remember a time when there were some decent Republicans that you didn't think were out to destroy our entire way of life, and this is what we're seeing.
Yeah, it is really just a difference of philosophies. It's one party that's interested in fixing the problems in democracy that led to what happened on January 6th, and another party looking at how to deny it happened while figuring out how to exploit that for 2022 and 2024. You're not going to come together in consensus on this. This is democracy and anti-democracy, and democracy has to be what we go with.
Yeah, so what are you expecting come Tuesday? Because I guess day one, Tuesday, right?
Yep. This is certainly going to be fireworks. I don't want to prejudge any of it, but I'm certain that what we're going to see will be explosive either way. There's certainly things that are going to come forward that have not been publicly discussed fully yet with regards to Capitol security that I think are really going to shock a lot of Americans.
No, I think this is important, and it's something that I hope everyone pays attention to. Max, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the work that you do over there at the Daily Beast. As this continues, love to have you come back on and share some thoughts with us.
Absolutely, anytime.
Good stuff. Our good friend Max Burns. Make sure you check out his work over at the Daily Beast. Quick break, right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1878. That was the day that a new song was introduced to the U.S. labor movement. Reverend Jesse H. Jones set the lyrics of a poem that had been written by I.G. Blanchard more than a decade earlier. The song was called The 8-Hour Day. The fight for 8 hours had become one of the central causes of labor. In 1850, the average work week was 70 hours. This meant that workers had little time for anything else beside their daily toil. After the Civil War, calls for the 8-hour day gained momentum. It became a movement that united workers from different workplaces and backgrounds. 8-hour leagues were formed in cities across the nation. They hosted talks and rallies to spread the word about the need to shorten the work week. At rallies, protesters waved 8-hour banners. They also sang the song that became their anthem. The first verse boldly began, "We mean to make things over. We are tired of toil for naught, with but bare enough to live upon, and never an hour for thought.
We want to feel the sunshine. We want to smell the flowers. We are sure that God has willed it, and we mean to have 8 hours. We're summoning our forces from the shipyard, shop and mill. 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will. The 8-Hour Day song continues to be reimagined today, including this version by Rhythm Fest.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So today, the first day of the Olympics in Tokyo, Japan, the number 2 softball team, beat the number 8 ranked Australian women's team 8-1. Evidently, the U.S. is softball team, the top ranked team, beat Italy in the second game. Sad news: the women's soccer team went down 3-0 to Sweden. And sadly, nobody in the stands, nobody gets to see this because this is the COVID Olympics. There will be no spectators. There will be none of that. We can all watch it on TV. And I'm waiting for the time where maybe we just do the Olympics via Zoom. All of the athletes get to stay home and they get to run at home. And then you just put it together on a Zoom camera and do something like that. So we don't have to have these debacles in city after city. Here to share some thoughts on the upcoming Olympics or the current Olympics and, well, the disaster that we've seen thus far. I've asked Timothy Noah to come talk with us. He's got a new piece out on this very topic of giving Greece back the Olympics. Timothy, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So, thus far, does this Olympics in Tokyo, does this match up to the past ones that we've seen in Athens and Atlanta and other places?
Seems like it's a little worse. It's a real problem when you can't get people into the stadiums, right? Or the arenas. The thing is, every 4 years, there is some mess up. It's a quadrennial ritual. Every 4 years there are going to be stories about how completely unready the host country is to host the Olympics, and it's not a big surprise. It's a completely new effort for each country. Even if they've hosted before, it's usually so long ago that nobody remembers exactly how it's done. It's an incredibly expensive proposition, and it's very wasteful, it seems to me. I think that rather than have this traveling show that doesn't work very well, we should just return the Olympics to Greece.
Yeah, I read that, and I've heard it before, that we should pick a central location and build, really good infrastructure that it's going to get some regular use because, you get the Olympics every couple of years, and I look at Brazil, for instance, when they did it, they built a whole bunch of stuff that, doesn't get used. In fact, I think at one point they turned some of it into homeless housing or something like that. I mean, it was, you had no more use for it. And right. It just seems like you said, a lot of wasteful spending. But this Olympic is a little different. You're in the midst of a global pandemic in a country that is really one of the lower vaccinated countries in the world.
Right. It's last I checked, they were below 20%. It's incredibly dangerous and insane for them to be doing this. Apparently, the Japanese, there have been polls in Japan. People don't want to proceed with this. And it just makes no sense at all.
And the athletes, every time I turn around, there's another athlete or another, somebody else can't play or can't participate because they've tested positive. And the only reason I found out that there is a women's 3-on-3 event is because Katie Lou Samuelson, someone my daughter really liked from UConn, got COVID and isn't going to be able to participate. And I'm going, when did we get 3-on-3 basketball in the Olympics? Did I miss that?
It's crazy, and Japan has declared actually a public health emergency. They've literally declared their own Olympics to be a public health emergency. The Tokyo is going to be in a state of public health emergency until the end of the Olympics. It's ridiculous.
So, in looking at this, do you think they should have just canceled the whole thing as, they did last year? They postponed it. Is this a postponed thing? Is this a canceled thing? Where do you think this should have gone?
I think they should have either canceled or postponed. It sort of blows my mind that there wasn't close, coordination between the folks who were monitoring the vaccination rate and the folks who were planning the Olympics. Maybe there was close coordination and they just didn't care. But it seems to be 20%. It really is not good enough.
Yeah, no, that's terrible.
Here in the United States, we're having a surge right now, and we're above 60%. That's not good enough either. But certainly 20% is really a big problem.
Now, who are we most concerned about? Are we concerned about the citizens of Japan because we're bringing all these people from around the world and all of the variants and all the different strains from around the world are converging onto one place? Or are we concerned about the athletes who, again, are going to be in these kind of close quarters in these Olympic villages on the cardboard beds that we've heard so much about? Where are we most concerned, do you think?
Why do we have to choose? I mean, I think it's bad I'm concerned about all of them. The COVID vaccine doesn't distinguish between who's a Japanese citizen and who's a visiting athlete from another country. This should not be taking place. It seems very clear to me that this is a bad public policy call.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree. But I have friends who are like, no, we need this. We need this in this moment, Timothy. We need this moment to lift up the country because sports brings us together. All that wonderful stuff.
I mean, by we, do you mean Americans? Because we've got, globally speaking, we've got a relatively high vaccination rate. We can invite friends over to watch the Olympics. There are many countries around the world where that's not such a good idea still.
Now, moving forward in the post, let's say we get past this, in the post, COVID era, or waiting for the next, virus to come up and bite us in the behind. These large scale events, do you ever see them coming back to where they were pre-pandemic?
Yes, I do. I mean, I think they will come back. I think that they're already starting to come back in the United States on a, sort of very kind of proceeding. The states are proceeding very cautiously, and at first I thought that was foolish, but now I realize no, that's wise because you do have to worry about who's gotten the vaccine, who hasn't. There's an incredible amount of timidity about asking people whether they've been vaccinated or not. I mean, I really applaud Springsteen on Broadway for it's the only Broadway show, or it was the first Broadway show that came back up, and they made everybody provide evidence that they'd been vaccinated before they let them in, and that's a good policy. I don't want to go up places where there are people who are unvaccinated and I risk getting the Delta variant.
Yeah. No, I was just reading a thing today that only like 43% of New York City police and support staff are vaccinated, and I'm like, that's not surprising to me.
Right.
The fact is now you've got to worry about the police not just coming and arresting you, but making you sick.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's we got to get the vaccination numbers up. Absolutely. And I think that really what needs to happen is that Biden needs to issue a national mandate for people to either wear a mask or be vaccinated when they go back to work. Which there was going to be an OSHA temporary standard that was going to be issued in March, and he chickened out.
Wow, I'm imagining the insanity that comes after that order, because I'm sure you remember Michigan and Ohio and here in Pennsylvania, all of the anti-maskers coming out and basically looking like zombies, on their last march for brains. I can't imagine what would happen if you said, no, not just that you have to wear a mask, but now we're gonna make sure you get the shot. I cannot imagine what that's going to look like.
Well, yeah, it would probably be bad, but it's worse to have people die unnecessarily.
But what do you say to the person? Because, I've been looking at this going, some of the news coming out has said that, basically the unvaccinated folks are the ones who are getting most sick. They're the ones who are, filling up our hospital ERs and filling up our ICUs. And they're the ones who are dying. What's wrong with going, you know what? Good.
Well, it's never good to have fellow human beings getting sick and dying. I mean, it just isn't.
Well, you make a choice.
Even people who make bad choices shouldn't. We should find ways to get them vaccinated. And you can make somebody, an employer could say you have to get vaccinated if you want to come back to work, because the employee could say, well, okay, I won't go back to work. So this is private enterprise, which the conservatives are supposed to love, right? But employers aren't doing it very much. And so I think the government would actually be doing private enterprise a great favor if they just stated the rules of the road, and then employers could shrug and say, hey, I don't like it, but the government's making me do it.
No, I get that all the time. You have to wear a mask because Tom Wolfe said so, and we hate him, but we have to wear it anyway. Get it all the time. But hey, I guess if it makes you follow the rules and do that, then great. But what do you do with the people who are so vehemently dug in? My wife went back finally to go get her occasional massage, and the woman who does the massage said, she's had people come back and refuse to come back because she's been vaccinated. And I forget what was the one that the one told her that because she's been vaccinated, she's got the mark of the beast in her and she's now Satan. And another one said that, there's going to be a slough off and she's going to make her sterile. I mean, there's all of this insane kind of misinformation and just out and out lies out there. How do you combat that?
I don't know. I mean, it's a tough one. But how many people are we talking about who were saying stuff like that to this masseuse?
Well, I mean, enough that she's closing her business and taking it home. Enough people that are, her business is severely hampered. And look, I know a bunch of people who believe the Facebook memes, who believe that they're putting microchips in people, and it's really kind of scary. And look, I've got some union friends who are, rallying to say, no, we're not going to let the employers mandate that we have to have vaccines. I mean, it's that kind of an issue that I think is pretty, pretty contentious.
I would expect that the union leadership would say, we don't want to come back unless you make sure people are vaccinated, because we want to protect the health of our workers.
You would think, wouldn't you?
That is their job.
One would think that, again, this is democracy in the workplace, and you would hope that the majority of workers would go, yeah, we would all like to be safe, thank you very much. But what do you do in an environment where the majority of workers, because unions are democracy in the workplace, say, no, we're not going to do it? That's where some of these unions are in trouble, and these are healthcare unions.
Well, I'll tell you, we have I've been filling in for an editor at the Washington Monthly and posting things online. And tomorrow we're posting a piece by Stephen Waldman, who runs a project called Report for America. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's modeled on Teach for America, and it sends reporters out to local newsrooms, young reporters. And he has a piece that's going up on the website tomorrow that says, one way to fight this misinformation is to increase the number of people who are reporting local news, because he said it's interesting. When people's diet consists only of national news, that's very polarizing. When people have a balance of national news but also local news, they bring a little more common sense to the table, because local news isn't nearly as polarizing, and there are divisions, but they're, it's not team A and team B. The divisions are sort of more complicated, and people agree about some things, don't agree about other things. And he thinks that this is a good way to disseminate better information.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I've been saying for years we need to break up some of these major conglomerates and fund local reporting and local investigative news. I'm all on favor, all on board with that idea.
Mm-hmm.
We most certainly needed. Too many of these giants have bought up local newspapers, and we're just running, national stories in them. Before I let you go, I want to get back to the original story. We kind of went off a little bit on the virus, but it fits with the story. In looking at Olympics going forward, I liked your idea of we should take this back to Greece or pick a location. Any chance of something like that ever happening?
Greece invented the Olympics.
I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Olympics were in Greece for 1,000 years. You wouldn't have the Rose Bowl in Burkina Faso, would you? So why do you have the Olympics anywhere except Greece?
And how do you see that working out?
Well, they probably need a little financial help to make it happen. I think the EU could help. Maybe the European Central Bank could help. Maybe the IOC could share some broadcast revenue with Greece to give the Greeks an incentive to run the thing right. And they probably, the first couple of times they did it, it would probably be a bit of a mess, as Olympics always are. But you would think that if they do it, by the third time or the fourth time, they would know how to do it because it'll be something they've done before, something they know how to do.
And maybe we could just, we won't have to hear these insane stories every year about cardboard beds and all the usual stories that come along every Olympic cycle.
Absolutely.
We will see how it goes. But Timothy, I appreciate the work that you do. Good stuff. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Timothy Noah, columnist there at the New Republic. Also got this piece over at the Washington Monthly. We'll get links out on social media, how you can take a look at that. And make sure you check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. But what do you think of that? What do you think of the idea of going, you know what? No more cities outbidding each other. No more cities wasting huge amounts of money on building infrastructure that we're probably not going to use for anything else. Building huge stadiums and arenas and stuff that we don't need when we've got other ones that are still functional. What do you think of that? Do you think that's a smart idea? Do you think somewhere we should move toward? Because I'll tell you, you look at the amount of money that gets spent on these events, these massive events, they never pay for themselves. They never generate enough revenue. They never bring in enough cash to make sure that people that it gets paid for. So to me, it sounds like a good idea. And look, Greece is still in trouble. This could be a boost where they get a little income every year. Sounds like a win-win to me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1931, and Chicago public school teachers went home without a paycheck. The school system was broke. Property owners out of work due to the Great Depression could not pay their property taxes, which were used to fund the public schools. Schools in inner cities lacked libraries, playgrounds, and often even adequate toilet facilities. Classrooms were overcrowded. Black teachers faced racial discrimination. School administrators piled on more clerical work onto teachers' already busy workloads. They introduced a blizzard of standardized tests. Still, according to an article published in 1927 in the American Teacher magazine, teachers were supposed to believe that teaching was a noble profession, free and immune from the cares of the more sordid world. The same article went on to say that many teachers, quote, believed their personal dignity and self-respect required that they keep aloof from any organization affiliated with labor. The Great Depression made teachers more militant. However, Chicago teachers stayed on the job despite the payless paydays. One Chicago teacher explained that they were determined not to desert the Chicago schools. It was not easy organizing Chicago's teachers. Only 10% of the teachers belonged to the 4 competing teachers' unions. But not getting paid helped arouse them. And 2 years later, 5,000 teachers converged on Chicago's largest banks in protest. They broke windows and overturned desks. Chicago's mayor, Ed Kelly, agreed to pay 4 of the 9 months back pay owed to them. Finally, in 1934, thanks to federal assistance, the Chicago teachers received all of their back pay. You only need read about the current Chicago teachers' struggle to see that the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Exciting news from Wall Street. Our wealth markets are booming. Everything from the Dow Jones average to gold prices are rocketing to new records, showering us with wealth from above. Oh, wait, maybe you're one of the big majority of workaday Americans who don't own stocks or gold, so maybe you're not celebrating Wall Street's big boom. But just chill, because conventional corporate wisdom assures us that the wealthy will invest their good fortunes in enterprises that eventually will produce trickle-down gains for everyone. Excuse my rudeness, but let's take a peek at how those who are reaping today's big buck bonanza are actually investing that wealth. Look at Wall Streeters themselves. The big banks have been making money like bankers, with their stock prices zooming up by 28% just since January. So how are these moneyed elites spending this windfall? Not by making job-creating investments, but by simply giving the money to their big shareholders, including their own top executives, nearly all of whom are already among the richest people on earth. The main way they do this is through a sleight of hand called a stock buyback. The honchos simply cash out the bulk of that 28% increase in the value of the bank's stock price, using that money to repurchase more of their bank's own stock from lesser shareholders. Hocus pocus! This manipulation artificially pumps up the value of the stock these insider shareholders already own, making each of them even richer than rich, although they've done absolutely nothing to earn this increased wealth. This is Jim Hightower saying, it's not a small scam. J.P. Morgan Chase is now sinking $30 billion into buying its own stock. Wells Fargo is shifting $18 billion into the scheme, and Bank of America is throwing $25 billion into its buyback. Wall Street bankers are the biggest robbers in America. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
One of the things that I've tried to impress upon my oldest daughter especially, and my all 3 of my kids, is that you got to start saving for retirement early. Male, female, doesn't matter. You got to start doing that. In fact, we started a Roth IRA for my daughter when she was 15. She got her first job. We said, we're going to start up with this Roth IRA. We're going to take half of your earnings, going to throw it in there. And in 50, 60, 70 years, that, a couple $1,000s we're going to put aside is going to be real money. That whole compound interest thing. Sadly, you think about this, and I go back to when I was a kid. I wish someone would have done that for me, because I didn't start really saving for retirement until my 30s. And thanks to my union, they started a little bit sooner. But retirement security is one of those things never too early to talk about, but especially for women, because what we're finding out is that women are falling way behind, or have fallen way behind. Man, and I look at my wife who stayed home to raise our children. I worry what happens when I go, and here to share some thoughts on how can we shore up retirement security for women from this day going forward. I've asked Maria Freese to come talk with us. She's a senior policy advisor with the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Their website, ncpss.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Maria, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. This is a subject that is near and dear to my heart, so I'm more than happy to come and talk about it anytime.
So how bad is it? How bad are women screwed in the retirement world?
Well, many people are aware of the gender gap in pay that women these days are earning about 82 cents for every dollar earned by a man, but most people don't realize that there's also a gender gap in retirement. So if you have a man and a woman that are hitting 60, they've been working 40 years doing comparable jobs, the man decides, oh, I have enough money, I can retire. The woman has to work another 9 years, almost a decade, well past Social Security's retirement age, before she will have accumulated as much as the man did in terms of lifetime earnings. That's a big gap. Right. And it really does affect women's ability to retire.
Now, why is that? Is that childbearing years? Is that, is that gender inequality? What's the cause of that?
Well, the pay gap is gender inequality. There are other reasons on top of the pay gap that affect retirement gap. The pay gap is a purely calculated on comparable job pay. And I think the large portion of the reason for that is the fact that most employers are men. And so they don't value the jobs that are primarily done by women, even in the same businesses. For example, you work in a factory, if you're the office manager, you're just as important to that business being able to function as you are if you're the shop foreman. Shop foreman's usually a man, office manager is usually a woman. Foreman's almost inevitably going to get paid more than the woman that's doing the office work. And if the office falls apart, it's just as damaging to the company as it is if the foreman can't get a product out. So when you have that kind of inequity built through the system, it just makes it harder and harder for women to get to retirement age and have enough accumulated for retirement.
When you talk about those things, I'm a big fan of transparency. As a union guy, I believe union contracts can solve a lot of these problems simply by making it transparent, writing it down on paper and justifying why it's on paper. So for me, that's the direction that I would go. Is there a way that you see outside of that we would go to change that situation? Or is it possible to change it?
We'd love to get more women in managerial positions and in ownership positions. As you know, if you have a little bit of history, Lilly Ledbetter was a woman who went all the way to the Supreme Court to be able to get some of that transparency that you're talking about. Yep. Because in most workplaces, you're not allowed to talk about how much you're earning. And that's part of the reason that women don't know that they're being undervalued. If you can't talk with your coworkers that are doing the same jobs or comparable jobs and find out what they're getting paid, you may go through an entire working career and not know that you have been undervalued. And so the legislation that passed that strips away that protection was a good thing, but you still need to do more. And the Paycheck Fairness Act, which passed the House earlier this year, would have been a good next step. But of course, couldn't overcome the filibuster in the Senate, so It couldn't go anywhere.
Now, you brought up the Lilly Ledbetter Act, which I always get into trouble with my female listeners who get angry when I say that shouldn't have ever happened. We shouldn't have wasted the political capital on passing that piece of legislation. What we should have done is we should have passed comprehensive labor law reform so that Lilly Ledbetter didn't get cheated for those 40 years. We shouldn't have changed the law to go, once she finds out, she can go and sue. We should have changed it to go, hey, let's make sure Lilly never gets cheated.
I can't disagree with you on that, although as an organization, we're focused on Social Security and Medicare, and my expertise is not in labor law, but I certainly wouldn't argue with you about that point, because there are ways of creating solutions through the ability of people to negotiate for their contracts and negotiate power, get some power in the balance. So that they can actually do a better job.
And transparency. Look, at the end of the day, if Lilly Ledbetter was a union member, if she had the ability to join and form a union, she would know what her coworkers were making. She would know what she's making. And right in the book, she'd find it out. And there wouldn't be 40 years of being cheated. But you did bring up Social Security because obviously that is your area of expertise. Is this a way that we could maybe change that balance and help women catch up a little bit by maybe adding a little bit to Social Security to kind of bump that up? Because Social Security is or was supposed to be an anti-poverty program. We want to make sure women stay out of poverty. Is this a way that maybe you can level that playing field a little?
Absolutely. And in fact, that's our focus. You can try to solve the problem a lot of different ways, one of which we have been talking about now, which is try to work on some of the pay disparities. Women also tend to end up in service jobs, which don't usually have any kind of pension or even access to a 401k plan necessarily. Women are more likely to be working part-time. And as you know, part-time workers have very limited access to retirement plans at work. Women are also more likely to take time out for caregiving. That's another problem. And so you have all these workplace issues that can get very controversial and very difficult to try to resolve. So we focus on as much as we can on the retirement end. And one of the ways of fixing that problem on the retirement end is expanding Social Security. Social Security already does some of that because the benefit is progressive, which means that you get more bang for your buck if you are a lower lifetime earner than you do if you're a high income. You're still going to get a bigger Social Security check if you earned more over a lifetime. But the way the formula works, you get more of a value for your dollar if you are lower lifetime earner. And that's the only program that works that way. That being said, we haven't had major Social Security reform since the mid-1980s, and the workplace has changed since then. So we firmly believe that we should be doing expansions of Social Security. We should be doing programs, legislation to restore the value of a lot of those benefits. A number of proposals are out there, and some of them they're all gender neutral, but some tend to help women more than others. For example, fixing the cost of living adjustment. Social Security is the only retirement program we have with an automatic cost of living adjustment, but it's pegged on an inflation indicator that doesn't correspond with the kinds of things that older people buy. Older people tend to spend more of their money on healthcare, for example, and healthcare expenses grow faster usually than the rest of the economy. And so we're constantly falling further and further behind. Women who live longer than men get impacted by that more because the longer you live, the longer your inflation is undercalculated, the further and further behind you fall over time. So there are proposals to readjust how the COLAs are calculated. That would help everybody, but especially would help women because we live longer. There are provisions out there to try to help surviving spouses because, as we talked about earlier, women tend to outlive their husbands. We tend to be the surviving spouses. And these proposals would end up boosting benefits for the survivors. Just because there's only one of us doesn't mean that our expenses get cut in half. You still have to pay for housing. You still have to pay for electric. You still have to pay for your health care. There are a lot of expenses that we have that aren't necessarily cut in half when we lose a spouse, and yet our Social Security benefits are cut in half. And so there are proposals out there to try to improve that. There are proposals to boost everybody's benefits, so nobody is below the poverty line in retirement, which is another positive impact. Right. So there are bills out there to try to make those changes.
But how do you do that? And look, I'm all in favor in increasing benefits and having a better leveling system. But how do you do that in a system that we're told is already losing money, that, in a couple of years, we're going to potentially see some radical changes. We haven't done anything to scrap the cap or increase that top number very much. So we're concerned there isn't enough money going in. At the same time, where we're almost hitting the point of where like 45% of working people are now in these gig jobs that aren't contributing to Social Security, setting up an even bigger retirement problem down the road. How do we deal with that?
Well, the gig workers are supposed to be contributing to Social Security. They are self-employed. And in fact, gig workers are supposed to be contributing both the employee and the employer share of the Social Security FICA tax. Now,
keyword,
it's a lot hard. Yeah, it's supposed to. Yes, it's a lot harder to monitor that, obviously, than it is if you're getting a form from your employer who has to also report it to IRS. So it's a bigger challenge. But you're absolutely right. It's going to take some increased revenue into the system because under current projections, no matter how exact the numbers are, at some point in the next decade or two, you're not going to have enough income coming in through the FICA tax as it's structured right now to be able to pay full benefits. There's still going to be money coming in, so you're still going to be able to pay benefits, but you won't be able to pay 100% of benefits. So one way or the other, we have to figure out a way to get more revenue into the system.
Right.
But you do it as part of a package that includes the benefit improvements, that includes the extension of solvency, and you figure out what the program should look like, and then you figure out how you're going to be able to pay for it. And we need to do both.
Yeah, because when my 19-year-old daughter, she's 19 now, and we sat down when she was 15 to fill out her Roth IRA forms and get her started in this. She said at 15 that she believed that she was never going to see a Social Security check. They're starting that kind of rhetoric early, and I don't know if that's, give the Social Security haters credit for being able to reach that far down, or if we just haven't done a good enough job to say, no, it's not going to go bankrupt. There's just going to be some changes, but we can alleviate that by making smart choices. But my daughter at a very young age said, no, that's not going to be there for me, which is why she was so into going, hey, how do I save for retirement now at 15 years old?
Well, that's absolutely right. And unfortunately for us, the other side has significantly more resources available to plant the misinformation than we do to try to correct it. And so it's been an ongoing problem of people scaremongering, particularly the young, that the program's not going to be there for them, and therefore undermining the support that the program has among Americans so that they can get rid of it and move everything over to Wall Street. So it's been an ongoing problem. On the side for your daughter, you have to remember Social Security was never intended to be the sole source of people's retirement. There was always an expectation that you would have other income coming in retirement.
The three-legged stool.
A pension, for example, a traditional pension. Remember the old three-legged stool? Well, it was going to be Social Security benefits, a traditional pension, and then whatever private savings you managed to have, either in your bank account, in your home value, and whatever else you've managed to save. Well, traditional pensions, as you know, as the union representation has gotten smaller, traditional pensions are harder and harder to find, and they're certainly not available in a non-unionized work environment. So that's the only thing that's left there. And people are saving less and less, especially the younger ones. I don't know whether your daughter has gotten through college yet, but these college kids that are coming through with these massive debts coming out of college that they're going to have to pay back. Not only are they not saving for their retirement, they're not able to buy housing. They are falling further behind than my generation was, which is, you never want that for your children and your grandchildren to be worse off financially than you were when you were growing up. You want things to be better for them.
No, and you're
Social Security is the only thing that's left that we haven't undermined. And here you've got these Wall Street guys that are basically trying to do that too.
No, I said this the other day about the three-legged stool. I go, it used to be, for my grandparents' dinner, it was a solid wooden, good solid three-legged stool. They've whittled those three legs down to one, basically a stick that they now want to beat us with because they want to take Social Security away. Because the defined benefit pension is a thing of the past. Like you said, there are a handful of union members who still have them, but good luck finding it. It's almost like a holy grail for people nowadays. And personal savings, because wages have been stagnant for 45 plus years. That's getting harder to do. And Social Security's got some problems at a time when we need it most. So last line of questioning I've got for you, how do we shore this up? What's the marching order? What are we telling people we want to do? How do we get to the place that, as we've been saying, we want some equity. We want women to have retirement security, but we want a system that's going to be solvent and shore up the bottom. How do we get there?
Well, we've been working with a number of members of Congress that are planning to reintroduce comprehensive reform bills. Congressman John Larson of Connecticut, for example, is the chairman of the House Ways and Means Social Security Subcommittee, and he had a comprehensive expansion and reform bill in the previous Congress. He's working on a new one this year that also reflects President Biden's priorities, because the president also had some proposals on Social Security during the campaign trail. So once those bills get introduced, what we're hoping is that the public will actually start pushing their members of Congress to support them. And in Pennsylvania, for example, you have some members of Congress, particularly on the Senate side, that are less likely to be willing to support something like that. And so we would urge people in states, particularly with Republican or conservative Democratic members, to push their members of Congress to try to support these pieces of legislation. And also make a little plug for us, join organizations like ours. What we do is lobby for Social Security and Medicare. We combine the voting power of all of our members and supporters, and we go up to the Hill and we tell members, you have X number of our members and supporters in your state or district, and they all support this bill, and they support Social Security, and they want to see it strengthened and expanded. They don't want to see benefits cut. So that's a large part of what we do. The more members and supporters we can get, the more people that would lobby their members on this issue, the better chance we have of actually moving it forward. And our website has wealth of information, all kinds of details on proposals as they come out and everything else. The website is our initials, National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare, ncpssm.org. We'd love to have as many additional members as we can, because there's strength in numbers, and you have to not only have numbers, but you have to be the squeaky wheel. You've got to be the people in there clamoring for this program. And I think part of what's happened is people have gotten a little complacent. They either think it's not going to be there for them, or on the other hand, they think it'll always be there and we don't need to fight for it. And neither one of those situations.
And then there's the other one. I got mine. I don't care about anybody else. Exactly. That's sad. But Maria,
we have to fight for it.
Yep, I'm there with you. I appreciate you taking some time for us. Hope folks will check out the website there at the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. We'll get links out on how you can do that. But Maria Freese, I appreciate you taking time for me.
Anytime. Happy to do it.
Good stuff. Thanks so much. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Are you planning for retirement? You talking to your kids about retirement? I'd love to hear it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1877. That was the day some of the worst violence of the Great Railroad Strike erupted in Pittsburgh. The strike started days earlier. It's contested as to whether it began in Martinsburg, West Virginia, or Baltimore, Maryland. The strike spread rapidly along the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad to New York State, Pennsylvania, and throughout the Midwest. At its height, the Great Railroad Strike involved well over 100,000 workers. The strike began on the Pennsylvania Railroad on the 19th. Management repeatedly tried to move trains through the yards and was confronted by angry strikers. Pennsylvania guardsmen were called out. The strikers presented the railroad with their demands. They wanted an end to double-engine trains that required fewer workers, wages reinstated, reinstatement for their fired co-workers, and an end to pay grades. Local militia sided with the strikers and refused to show for duty. When thousands of strikers gathered at the depot, the Pennsylvania National Guard moved unsuccessfully to disperse them. Then they fired on the strikers, killing 20 and wounding 29. The strikers were infuriated by the deadly aggression and drove guardsmen into a nearby railroad roundhouse. Word spread quickly throughout the city of the massacre, launching a virtual general strike. Workers began seizing arms wherever they could find them. They set fires to dozens of railroad buildings, burned down the Union Depot, destroyed over 100 locomotives, and more than 1,000 freight and passenger cars. The next day, guardsmen shot their way out of the roundhouse, killing 20 more as they were chased from the city. A total of 3,000 federal troops would be necessary to quell strikers' fury by month's end. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Retirement security is really one of those things that I worry about for my kids especially. because there's a real possibility politically that the Republicans who have been hell-bent on privatizing Social Security could get their way. And can you imagine? I mean, stop and think of had George Bush had his way and they went and they privatized, huge swaths of Social Security right before 2008, the 2008 collapse. Can you imagine how many people would be, basically destitute? Then you fast forward it to the next calamity here during the Trump years. Can you imagine how much people would have lost? Now it's bounced back a lot faster from last year than it did 2008, 2009, 2010. But can you imagine how many people would have been harmed by that? And then look, it doesn't jump right back to where it was. There's a period of where you're losing interest potential. And then shame on the people who need to take it out during the trough, during the downturn. And it's something I've been trying to tell my kids, because I wish someone would have grabbed me aside and said, no, you need to put a little bit of something aside and forget about it. I didn't get smart until I was about 30. But and it's because you started thinking down the road. But hopefully my kids will be a lot smarter than I am, and that's the whole thing we want. We just want our kids to be smarter than we are. We want them to have better opportunities and better lives than we were able to do. That really is the American dream kind of thing, that we want to do as well as we can, but we want our kids to always do better. We want better opportunities for them, better education, better health care, a better future. Or at least I think that. I could be wrong. Interesting story by The Guardian. And again, it's amazing to me that The Guardian, a newspaper in the UK, is where the reporting on workplace safety in the U.S. has to go to be reported. Evidently, there's a new report out by the IZA Institute of Labor Economics that actually looked at the data in California of people who got hurt on the job between 2001 and 2018. They looked at some 11.6 million claims. 11.6 million claims. And what they did is they went and they tried to, with weather data, they found what the weather temperature was, during the time of these injuries, because they're all dated. So you can put them into date form and find, when it was 60 degrees out, how many people got hurt. When it was 70 degrees out, how many people got hurt. When it was 80, 90. And what they came up with is that injuries went up when the temperature was between 80 and 85 degrees, 3.5 times more than if it were on a 60-degree day. And when it got to be 90 and 95, the risk of someone being injured went up 7% over that of a 60-degree day. And as they pointed out, if you on a 95-degree day, you get a little dizzy and you fall off a ladder, that's not a heat-related injury. That's you just fell off a ladder. And that's how it's reported. Now, interesting that California has a law that employers are supposed to, they have this heat illness prevention standard, which employers are supposed to ensure that outdoor workers have access to cool water, shade, an opportunity to get hydrated and to keep their body temperature down. But and look, they're claiming that this legislation, this law, has reduced the heat-related injuries by 1/3. But according to this data, California only reported 60 heat-related injuries per year over the last several years. Only 60 people had heat-related. So that's like heat stroke. And that's something that would be a diagnosis. Well, he definitely fell over of dehydration because of the heat. Only 60 of those. So that's telling me a couple of things. Out of 11.6 million claims, you're only getting 60 per year. That's telling me employers are doing some pretty interesting, shenanigans with the categorization, and that the medical profession probably a little in on it too. What they also found out is the poorer you are, the more likely you're going to get injured during a high heat time of the year. And I would argue that without the research, that the lower your income, the more likely you're going to be injured on the job as well, because you're generally doing more manual labor, more risky kind of labor for employers who are, a little shadier. So that not so much to me is a surprise to me. But, the numbers going up, kind of an interesting thing and something that we should be looking at. And again, the reason I bring this up is I would argue that you could mitigate some of that by ensuring that people have the voice in the workplace to say, you know what, I need a little break. I need to go in where it's cool a little bit, take a drink, and not be harassed by an employer to, crack the whip, so to speak. Kind of like some of the horror stories we hear from Amazon. Because some of the horror stories I've heard is, the factories or the warehouses are unbearably hot in some of them, and the pace of the work is outrageous. In fact, I was just reading a story of a woman who worked at Amazon who had a miscarriage because they wouldn't give her, lighter duty work to do. In fact, I would argue they probably gave her heavier work to do to make her to head out the door, because that's how cruel some people are. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Does that make sense? The hotter it gets, the more likely it is people are to be injured. Makes perfect sense to me. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
In one of the world's wealthiest nations, advanced infrastructure was no match for Mother Nature.
Catastrophic floods in Germany show nowhere is safe from our worsening climate emergency. Parts of Amazon rainforest now emit more CO2 than it absorbs. Plus,
the NASA study predicts flooding will sometimes occur in clusters lasting a month or longer in the 2030s.
High tide flooding hit a record in the U.S. last year. NASA warns it's going to get much, much worse.
All of that moon wobbling and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
California is in the grip of a drought, and that's causing Sacramento's drinking water to taste like dirt. But one city official assured residents it might not taste great, but it's still safe to drink. And was immediately sued for copyright infringement by Michelob Ultra.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, boy, howdy, you are right. Nowhere is safe. What an horrific sight we all saw in Germany last week.
Yes, it was. As we go to air, nearly 200 are confirmed dead in catastrophic flooding in Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands as rescuers search for hundreds that are still listed as missing. Days of torrential rain triggered wildly destructive flash floods that swept away buildings, destroyed communications and transportation, and displaced thousands. German officials say the historic floods far exceeded the conditions that their flood control systems were designed for, and exposed flaws and gaps in the country's emergency alert systems. The disaster hit just days after the European Union announced its ambitious roadmap to cut carbon emissions that cause dangerous man-made climate change, and the floods have pushed climate action to the front of national elections to replace retiring Chancellor Angela Merkel.
Good.
The influence of man-made climate change in this specific event will take time to determine, but the floods are just the latest in a wave of extreme weather disasters around the world, including record heat and forest fires in Russian Siberia, and Canada and the U.S. West grappling with historic drought and record-smashing high temperatures that cooked fruit on trees. In the U.S., fire crews are battling more than 70 major fires. Oregon's Bootleg Fire, the largest in the U.S. so far this year, has burned more than 530 square miles and is so hot that it is disrupting the atmosphere. In California, utility giant Pacific Gas and Electric announced that its aging equipment may have sparked the Dixie Fire.
May? Are those people still in business?
Experts say the wave of extreme disasters shows that even the world's richest nations are not prepared for cascading consequences of climate change, underscoring the need for governments to move quickly on adaptation projects to build infrastructure resilience against intensifying extreme weather disasters, even as they also cut greenhouse gas emissions. Here's Penn State University climate scientist Dr. Michael Mann in an interview with Democracy Now!
The fact that we're in both of these countries right now are witnessing the devastating impacts of climate change really drove home the point that we have to act now. Dangerous climate change is here. Catastrophic climate change is here. And at this point, it's a matter of how bad we're willing to let it get.
Oh, I fear we are willing to let it get much worse.
Well, those consequences are arriving earlier than predicted. New research published in the journal Nature shows that parts of the Amazon rainforest in South America now emit more carbon dioxide than they absorb, primarily caused by deforestation, fires, and global warming.
Let me repeat that. They now emit more carbon than they absorb. The Amazon used to be our carbon sink. It would keep us safe. It would suck up all the carbon. Now it's putting off more than it is taking in.
NOAA announced that sunny day flooding, or routine flooding at high tide, hit a record along U.S. coasts over the last year due to rising sea levels. And NASA, in a new first-of-its-kind study, warned that a natural shift in the moon's orbit around the Earth, combined with rising sea levels, will cause high tide flooding to jump 5 to 10-fold in the mid-2030s, hitting some areas near daily.
Now, of course, that would happen whether there was climate change on Earth or not. This is just making it all much worse, correct?
Yes. But there is some good news.
Good.
The nation of Greenland has suspended all oil exploration because of climate change, with its environmental minister explaining, quote, "The future does not lie in oil. The future belongs to renewable energy, and in that respect, we have much more to gain."
Nice.
Finally, in that Democracy Now! Interview, Dr. Mann says there is hope in taking action.
There is still time. Don't let the doomers convince you it's too late to do anything about climate change. That leads us down the same path of inaction as outright denial. And the forces of inaction would love nothing more than for environmental progressives to remain on the sidelines because they're convinced it's too late to do anything. It isn't too late, but we have to act, and we have to act now.
Oh, it's too late. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
You know, I know everyone loved Dr. Anthony Fauci going after Rand Paul, basically telling him, literally telling him, you don't know what you're talking about, basically smacking him down, which I thought was great. I'm going, it's great. Nice job. Congratulations. You're probably going to regret it. Because today Rand Paul came out and said he's going to send a letter to the DOJ to have him investigated and potentially arrested, tried, convicted. He's gonna try and get him, go after him. Now, will it happen? I don't know. I'm not quite sure that the Biden DOJ will go that route, but it kind of makes you wonder. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on on the doctor, the rising virus, and much more. I've asked our good friend Bob Ney, former Ohio congressman and political analyst, to share some thoughts and give some insight on these top stories. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thank you, Rick.
So, I'm sure you saw Fauci, going off on him, which I thought was great. About damn time.
Correct.
Is he going to regret it?
I don't think he's going to regret it. I think Dr. Fauci has to be a bit careful, just on a couple of things. And I was a Fauci fan. I'm just seeing some things he's saying, and I'm thinking, okay, just be a little bit careful in the sense of not what Rand Paul's talking about. When he said, if you question science, you question me, I'm the face of it, he's making himself the face of this issue.
Yeah.
I think that's a problem for him. If it continues, then you know how that runs. You become the face of something, somebody tries to rip your face off.
Yep.
So that's always a problem. And then the second thing is the numbers. He said, well, I really didn't want to say that we need more than 70% on the herd immunity. So there's a few things there, like you can with science. I understand that. A few things there he, might have some problems with that, people can kind of bash him on that. Then it becomes science versus Dr. Fauci, the vaccinations versus Dr. Fauci, and I just don't want to see it go that direction. I think he's got a lot to offer. As far as Rand Paul, criminal investigation for lying to, I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but want me to go back through the history of people who have lied to Congress,
Yeah.
Nothing happens if they do lie to Congress. So this is just Rand Paul's way of then saying, well, you see, the Biden administration really doesn't want to know, about the gain of function research and China, and they love China and blah, blah, blah. So I don't think this goes anywhere.
Yeah, it makes for good, as I said at the beginning of the show, it's kind of like the WWGOP. This is all, I'm waiting for Mean Gene to come out and, all of the characters to do their spiel. This is kind of that.
Right. So I don't think in the long run, again, this does anything. I do think Dr. Fauci has to be careful that he doesn't, again, become the face of, anything that goes wrong. It was the Fauci syndrome that did it. So I just think he has to be careful because he has good things to offer.
No, he does, but the Republicans are kind of pushing him into this. I mean, I'm sure you've seen down in Florida how DeSantis's campaign is selling all of the "Don't Fauci Florida" propaganda, the T-shirts and the beer koozies and all that stuff.
Oh yes, and I mean, look, I think Fauci should hit back. In fact, the whole Democrat messaging at certain times, what they say on the committees. I'm just sitting there as a former member thinking about things I've heard for 11 years while I was there. I mean, there's some things I think the Democrats can come back at Republican members and hit them pretty good instead of just saying, oh, be quiet, you're obnoxious. I think there's some real ways to come back and cut at them, for actions they've done, things they've done. So, yes, I think you've got to, it's not a spectator sport. So what he did was not wrong in fighting back.
Now, what's interesting is I don't know if you're seeing it, but I'm starting to see some Republican voices, some conservative voices who were anti-vax, who were don't get the vaccine, it's all a hoax, who are now coming around to saying no, you should go do that now because the numbers are rising again, and it happens to be mostly in areas that listen to them.
Correct. The numbers are rising. You have Republican member who, has I think he's got the variant. And of course, on a bipartisan basis, 3 of the Texas legislators, came to the Capitol, and I guess, they've got something. It's there. This virus doesn't pick and choose who it goes to. It's transmitted. So, I like a comment you made on your show the other day, which I think is correct. There's not going to be unless something way out happens, a massive shutdown, but there's going to have to be steps to be taken. I think the worst thing that happened, Rick, was the CDC saying, oh, if you had the vaccination, you don't have to wear your mask, but we're going to have the honor system. If you haven't had it, you got to wear your mask. I think right there was a problem.
No, because I've got it. You've got all these people who are, and because you were never getting the passport. And look, I wouldn't even stand for that.
Mm-hmm. I will because I want to travel.
Look, I'm not a papers, please person. It's one of those things that it's kind of screwy because look, I'm traveling in October.
Mm-hmm.
I got a speaking gig coming up in October, and we're going to Alaska. I desperately want to go. I love Alaska,
Right.
But if things keep getting worse, what happens? And we start shutting things down again randomly in certain spots. Maybe, but I don't see widespread shutdowns happening again. I think we have to. We're gonna be forced to power through this. And I'm looking at some of the numbers from Florida, where they're saying it's just crazy. The one ICU, I guess, just a couple of weeks ago had like 16 people in it. They now have 134. They're basically slammed. The daily numbers have gone up from the beginning of the month, like 13,000 up to 37,000. We're now seeing some jumping.
I think it's going to be over the board. Like I said, I don't mind getting this passport to travel. And I went with my daughter and her family, and we had to wear masks on the plane, and you don't have to wear masks in Home Depot. So there's all different ways that they're looking at this. So I don't mind some of that, but there's not going to be. I agree. There's not going to be a one cure-all in it of just a general shutdown unless it gets extremely, extremely bad. But there's a bottom line here: the vaccination numbers have to go up. They have to go up, and that will be of a great help. I think most people agree on that.
Do you think the fact that Hannity is now coming out saying that he thinks people should get vaccinated? You got Mitch McConnell going, "Oh, gee, I don't know why we're not vaccinating people." You think that's going to matter any to the Republican base?
Mitch McConnell had polio, and so he's someone that should say, what he's saying. And then with Hannity, I hope it helps. But then, I've talked to some people who just believe that in 5 years, we who have been vaccinated are going to grow a third ear. There's just some of that out there. But I think the more people talk about it, the more it helps. And also, I think neighbor to neighbor talking about it. I've tried to share with people in my family and friends that don't want to get vaccinated of, why I did and, what it was like. And my father's 98 and, he got it and he's alive. So, maybe hopefully that'll help a little bit too, people to people communication.
Now let's get to the big story of the day. Nancy Pelosi, I'm still in the mindset that this was probably not the best idea. I understand why she did it. But rejecting, Jim Jordan and Representative Banks, I don't know that was a great idea.
Yeah, look, I always tell people, there's certain people, I pontificate about, like John Bolton, my favorite punching bag. And people ask me about being in Congress. I got along with Nancy Pelosi when she was the minority leader. I got along with her fine. I just wanted to state that out front. We worked with her office as we did all the offices, but intricately because she was the leader, things like that. So, having said that, this is the congressional speech. I like the distinguished lady from California, but then you throw the but in there. I think this is one of the worst moves I've ever seen her do.
Really?
Ever, yes, ever.
I fear you've created another side circus that is going to give the Republicans the ability to go on their conservative media, which is dominant in this country, and basically just create their own narrative and give them a reason to ignore what's going on in the committee. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a horrible move. I was in shock. I read into something. I think I'm going to be right in what I say tonight. He didn't say it, but I think I know where he's going with it. And I'm talking about McCarthy, the minority leader. I must say it was probably one of the better speeches I've ever heard him give in a sense of, how he delivered it, et cetera. It was on CNN. He talked about, I'm not going to go over the whole thing, but Banks is a veteran of Afghanistan. He's been excluded from the committee. He fought for his country. Jordan's been on a select committee, and he knew this would happen, should play politics with it. And here's what he referred to, very interesting. He said Chuck Schumer didn't pick who went on the committees. They had two of them in the Senate. And then he talks about, Pelosi sort of being a dictator, and he makes a point, this has never happened. The historian said it's never happened. And he said, so you've got one party that wants to pick everybody. So having said all that, though, here's something he said, and what you just were alluding to is going to happen, I think. When he said they're going to create their own inquiry, all right? And this is going to be the sideshow, but here's what he said. He said that they're going to get down to the bottom of why the Capitol was so ill-prepared that day and what you can do to make sure it never happened again. And I'm going to read into that. They're going to go internally, because you have the Speaker, the Chair of House Administration, Sergeant of Arms, Chief of Police of the Capitol, and the Capitol rank and file. They're going to start to make this an issue that the Speaker and the head of the committees that oversee the security of the Capitol didn't do their job, didn't listen. Maybe the Chief of Police went to one of them. I don't know. They're going to make that the sideshow.
Yep.
I can read between the lines of what McCarthy, the minority leader, said today.
No, I guarantee that's going to be the route, because Jim Jordan said basically the same thing. Mm-hmm. And they're delivering the signs. We know what's coming, and I would have preferred them to be forced into at least being into that committee and not being able to have their own sideshow. That's the part that's worrying me the most, because they have the bigger megaphone.
They do, and there's the other thing. Okay, put Jordan on the committee, and let him be on the committee. People on the committee, and then McCarthy said this, that he doesn't like that Pelosi put on, but he's not going to tell her, what she can do. She runs, her end of the party. But okay, Jordan comes on the committee. There's 100 ways to attack Jim Jordan besides saying be quiet. Okay.
Yeah.
There's 100 ways, and they could do some of that. Or who are you to talk about doctors? Who are you to talk about this? I mean, it can get down and dirty, and it can get aggressive, and it's not a spectator sport, as I said earlier, but now it's not going to happen as just the committee to go back and forth and focus on this and banter back and forth. Now there's going to be a separate sideshow that the media will pay attention to.
Oh, absolutely. That whole both sidism kind of thing. And look, as I've said, the Republicans know they've got a bigger microphone. So for me, the reason I would have wanted Jim Jordan on there is because I think at some point you got to call him as a witness. Same thing as with McCarthy. I think you have to call them and put them under oath and find out what they know and what they did and all of that stuff.
Like I said, 100 points you can make on him.
Yep.
But I was amazed. I don't know who advised. This is not, by the way, this is not in the speaker's character. I know her. I serve with her. It's not in her character to just say, I'm going to do this. Usually she's one who, institutionally, okay, you do what you do and we'll do what we do on our side. So, I don't know. Somebody made a suggestion and it must have kind of looked good at the time. So we'll see what happens. It'll be a battle.
See, for me, I would have left Jordan on there simply because I would want Jordan and Cheney going at each other.
Or absolutely. I mean, you and I could sit down and think about, we could write questions for this committee members. We could write questions for them that would be fantastic. And there's going to be a natural animosity anyway from Cheney, to Jordan. So
because wasn't the story that he had reached his hand out to help her, and she basically said, "You effing did this."
Yes, that's what's out there.
Yeah, I want that testimony.
Right, exactly. So
Tuesday, right?
Right. I just don't think it was a good move.
This starts Tuesday, right?
I think it's Tuesday. Yes.
I can't wait for Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see what kind of coverage it gets, and I'm hoping somebody will be tracking how many stories from each thing ends up on the mainstream news.
Right.
Going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But Bob, I appreciate the time as always. Great stuff.
Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Ney. No, seriously, I there's part of me that goes, I understand you don't want it to turn into a circus. You don't want Jim Jordan tanking your whole thing. But man, the fact that you would have Liz Cheney, two Republicans going at each other, and you can just sit back and go, and let the fireworks happen while you just separate yourself from it. I don't know what went into going, yeah, we're going to throw him off. And again, I'd love to have him seen him been called. So I guess this could have been, this is a favor that Nancy played for the Republicans, because now that they're going to have their own little kangaroo court. Love to hear your thoughts. Was she right? Did she do the right thing? You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1878. That was the day that a new song was introduced to the U.S. labor movement. Reverend Jesse H. Jones set the lyrics of a poem that had been written by I.G. Blanchard more than a decade earlier. The song was called The 8-Hour Day. The fight for 8 hours had become one of the central causes of labor. In 1850, the average work week was 70 hours. This meant that workers had little time for anything else beside their daily toil. After the Civil War, calls for the 8-hour day gained momentum. It became a movement that united workers from different workplaces and backgrounds. 8-hour leagues were formed in cities across the nation. They hosted talks and rallies to spread the word about the need to shorten the work week. At rallies, protesters waved 8-hour banners. They also sang the song that became their anthem. The first verse boldly began. We mean to make things over. We are tired of toil for naught, with but bare enough to live upon, and never an hour for thought. We want to feel the sunshine. We want to smell the flowers. We are sure that God has willed it, and we mean to have 8 hours. We're summoning our forces from the shipyard, shop and mill. 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will. The 8-Hour Day song continues to be reimagined today, including this version by Rhythm Fest. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, a guy from Tampa, yes, another Florida man. A lot of people from Florida caught up in this January 6th insurrection, but this guy pled guilty yesterday to joining the stack formation. This was that kind of wedge thing that they're pushing through the crowd with these group of oath keepers to breach the Capitol on the 6th. Evidently, he's been cooperating with prosecutors, and he's pled guilty to 1 count of conspiracy and 1 count of obstructing an official proceeding. And what's important about that is he's saying, look, that was the intent. The intent all along was to do what even Trump himself said was the intent, which was to stop the certification of the election. To intimidate, to coerce, to do whatever they had to do to stop Mike Pence, who they threatened to hang, and to stop the proceedings from happening. And the judge accepted his plea. He faces potentially, as part of what the plea agreement was, from anywhere from 51 to 63 months in jail. Going to be interesting to see where that goes. It was much higher. This was the agreed to estimated prison time. They claim he's got no record. He is one of the younger defendants. So, in exchange for his basically ratting out the rest of them, he'll get a lighter sentence. So it will be interesting to see what the other oath keepers, the older ones, what they're going to get. What kind of sentences that we'll see out of them. I'm of the mindset that, there should be substantial jail time, if for no other reason than to send the message of, you don't do that. You don't do it. So going to be interesting. Now, like I said, Tuesday, I am looking forward to the beginning of this testimony. I find it interesting that Pelosi did what she did, and we'll see. You know, like anything, we'll look back on it and go, was it a smart move? Was it a dumb move? What was it? You know, for right now, I'm going, I don't know that I would have. I would have let them sit who they wanted, so they didn't have that talking point. And I know early in the show, Max Burns said, you know, we'll give them a couple of news cycles. I don't know. I'm a little leery of that. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Was it a smart decision? Dumb decision? Would Republicans have done the same thing? You think of the Benghazi hearings, you know, how long those went on forever. It will be interesting to watch. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Lots of things to get to tomorrow. Tune in. I'm going to talk a little bit about the nursing strike that's going on up in Massachusetts. That's on the horizon. Our good friend Sarah Burris back. Lots and lots to get to. Make sure you tune in. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.